The idea that the Civil War would be a short, glorious affair was shattered almost immediately. At the First Battle of Bull Run, what was supposed to be a decisive Union victory turned into a spectacle of panic and chaos. Soldiers who had marched off expecting an adventure found themselves in a frantic retreat. Civilians, who had gathered with picnic baskets to watch the battle from a safe distance, were swept up in the pandemonium, fleeing alongside the broken Union lines. This wasn't a grand parade. This was war in its raw, terrifying form. The rude awakening at Bull Run forced both the North and the South to confront a grim reality. This was not going to be easy. Both sides scrambled to build real armies from the ground up. Millions of men from every walk of life, farmers pulled from their fields, clerks from their desks, immigrants seeking a new start, and teenagers barely old enough to shave on the blue or the gray and marched into a future filled with uncertainty. They were about to face a level of destruction that no one could have truly anticipated. The technology of warfare had taken a terrifying leap forward. The traditional smoothbore muskets of past conflicts had been replaced by rifled muskets. These new weapons were accurate at much longer distances, turning what were once relatively safe open fields into deadly killing zones. A line of infantry could now deliver devastating fire from hundreds of yards away, mowing down attacking formations before they even got close. Artillery had also become more powerful and more precise. Shells filled with shrapnel could tear through ranks of soldiers, leaving behind a horrifying trail of bodies and limbs. The romantic image of charging cavalry and glorious bayonet fights was quickly replaced by the brutal math of modern firepower. While the weapons of destruction were advancing, the science of medicine was stuck in the past. The greatest killer in the Civil War wasn't a bullet or a cannonball. It was disease. The massive armies, living in crowded and often unsanitary camps, became breeding grounds for typhoid, dysentery, and smallpox. For every soldier killed in combat, two more die from sickness. Medical care was primitive by today's standards. Field surgeons worked in horrifying conditions, often without anesthesia and with no understanding of germ theory. Sterilization was non-existent. A wound that would be minor today could easily become a death sentence from infection. Amputation was the most common surgical procedure, a desperate attempt to stop gangrene from spreading. Simply surviving was often a matter of pure luck, despite their early victories and the fierce spirit of their soldiers. The Confederacy was facing a war of attrition it simply could not win. The South was an agrarian society, lacking the industrial might of the North. It had few factories to produce weapons, ammunition, and uniforms. Its railroad network was limited, making it difficult to move troops and supplies effectively. And perhaps most critically, it lacked manpower. The North's larger population and steady stream of immigrants meant it could replenish its armies and absorb staggering losses. The South could not. Every soldier lost was a blow from which the Confederacy struggled to recover. Yet, for a time, the South defied the odds. This was largely due to a handful of brilliant and audacious military leaders, chief among them Robert E. Lee. Taking command of the Army of Northern Virginia, Lee proved to be a master strategist and tactician. He consistently outmaneuvered and outfought larger Union armies, winning a string of stunning victories that boosted Southern morale and kept the hope of independence alive. Lee became a legendary figure, a symbol of the Confederate cause. But his aggressive style of warfare came at a terrible price. His victories were incredibly costly, leading his army of men that the South simply could not replace. While the Confederacy had Lee, the Union struggled to find effective leadership. President Abraham Lincoln cycled through a series of commanders for the main Union Army in the East. The Army of the Potomac. These generals were often overly cautious, hesitating at critical moments and failing to press their advantages. They seemed intimidated by Lee's reputation, allowing him to dictate the tempo of the war. Opportunities to strike a decisive blow were squandered time and time again. Lincoln, watching from Washington, grew increasingly frustrated. He knew that the Union's material advantages meant nothing without generals who were willing to fight. He understood that something fundamental had to change if the war was ever to be won. That change came on September 17, 1862, on the rolling fields of western Maryland, near a small creek called Antietam. Here, Lee's army, bold from its recent victories, collided with the Union's Army of the Potomac in the single bloodiest day in American history. The fighting was savage and relentless. Battles raged in a cornfield where men were cut down in rows like stalks of grain. A sunken country lane, later known as Bloody Lane, became filled with the bodies of fallen soldiers. The fighting swirled around a stone bridge for hours, as Union troops desperately tried to cross under a hail of Confederate fire. When the sun set on Antietam, the fields and woods were littered with over 23,000 casualties, men who were killed, wounded, or missing. The scale of the carnage was almost incomprehensible. The battle was technically a draw, but both armies battered and exhausted. But Lee's invasion of the North had been stopped, and he was forced to retreat back into Virginia. The illusion that the war could be won quickly or without immense sacrifice was gone forever. Antietam shocked both sides into the realization that this conflict would be a long, grinding struggle to the death. But the horrific bloodshed at Antietam gave President Lincoln something he desperately needed: a victory. It wasn't the crushing, decisive victory he had hoped for, but it was enough. It provided him with the political leverage he needed to make a move he had been contemplating for months, a move that would fundamentally transform the purpose of the war. 5 days after the battle, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. He declared that if the Confederate States did not rejoin the Union by the beginning of the next year, all slaves in the rebellious territories would be thenceforward and forever free. The war was no longer just about preserving the Union. It was now also a war to end slavery. This single act redefined the conflict, turning it into a moral crusade and ensuring that there could be no turning back. The stakes were now higher than ever. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please consider liking it and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into history. Part 3 of the American Civil War is coming soon.